staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I am your host and founder of Alzheimer's Speaks, Lori LeBay. And before we get started, I always like to let our new listeners know who we are and kind of what we do. Bottom line, Alzheimer's Speaks is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. And I initiated this business due to my own journey with my very own mother, who had dementia for 30 years. And I just I got really upset and felt very isolated that I didn't know where services, products, and tools were. And I thought there's got to be a way to be able to lift everyone's voice and to be able to share all of the knowledge there is around the world. And so here on Alzheimer's Speaks, we interview people that have dementia. We interview advocates, family members, business professionals. We've had doctors and researchers on, movie directors, singers, songwriters, authors, you name it. We're open to everyone's voice because we're a team and we need to be able to share that knowledge. And we truly believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations like we do here on Alzheimer's Speaks, that we're going to be able to remove a lot of the stigma attached to the disease and help people live purpose-filled lives. Let them not feel so isolated and know that there is a common ground and a common bond between those dealing with the disease. At our core, we also believe that collaboration is the only way that we're going to win this battle against dementia. And I know it's working thanks to each and every one of you. You see, your likes, your clicks, and your shares have gotten us acknowledged as the number one influencer online regarding Alzheimer's, according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz. And we were also recognized by Maria Shriver as an architect of change for humanity. And the only way that happened was through all of you. So I encourage you to continue to share our information with your spheres of influence, if that's your LinkedIn colleagues, if it's your Facebook friends, if it's your Twitter tribe or your Pinterest peeps. The more information we can share out there publicly to people in need, the easier their life is going to be. And, you know, everybody has spheres of influence with people in it that are dealing with dementia, but you don't know, because they're not even comfortable telling us. And so we have to have these conversations. And by throwing more information out there, it's going to ease the process. And I'm speaking from experience. It eases the process and opens the door to have a conversation. So if you're listening today and you think you have a story to share, please contact me. You can go to alzheimersspeaks.com. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a big button that says contact, and, you know, give me a call, shoot me an email, are the best ways to reach me. And we'll see if maybe you can be our next guest on the show. I also want to give a shout out to the Call Alert Center. They also have the Caregiver Alert Center, which is just a fantastic way to protect a loved one who is dealing with potential wandering. And, you know, go ahead and check them out. You can find a big button to access them on our homepage at Alzheimer's Speaks. And then I would be amiss if I didn't invite you all to join us November 11th through the 18th for our Bahamas cruise. We're heading to the Caribbean for 7 days, and it's going to be a dementia-friendly cruise and symposium. And we still have some openings in our group, and we'd love for you to join us. There'll be plenty of time to relax and rejuvenate. But in the symposium, I have 4 brilliant people who are all diagnosed with dementia who will be sharing their stories and their insights, along with Cindy Lazinski, who's heading up a dementia-friendly city in Colorado, and Becky Watson, who is who is a music therapist. And we're also going to be having somebody from the American Senior Magazine join us as well. And we're still formulating information on that. Last, before I get into the show, I just want to point out on our website, you can also download some helpful tips when dealing with dementia. So just go to alzheimersspeaks.com and you can go ahead and access that. Now, today we are going to have a really interesting conversation about living with dying. And I'm so excited. We've got 2 authors with us, Jahnna Beecham and Katie Ortlip. And Katie is a nurse and a social worker. And these 2 gals became friends and neighbors. And then everything really changed when Jahnna's 90-year-old father was told that he had prostate cancer and it had spread to his bones. And at that moment, Jahnna became his caregiver, while Katie became his hospice social worker. And together, these 2 amazing women journeyed through this really emotional time and became even closer. They shared a lot of their insights to end-of-life care in this book called Living with Dying. And it's a really easy-to-use guide for care partners, which gives insights, how to have a conversation about dying and navigating the emotional and spiritual journey of death. And working with other family members, working with hospice, and that one kind of forbidden thing that none of us do very well is self-care. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation with these 2 women today. So welcome, Jahnna. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Lori, for having us on the show.
Well, good. And Katie, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm also so excited to be here with you, Lori. Talk about our book.
Yeah, your book is really, it's laid out so nicely, and it's, the print is big enough, the contrast is good, and it's designed really easy. I think it's going to turn into people's Bible for care. Because it's one of those things that you're not just going to read once, you're going to go back and keep referencing it, which I think is fantastic. So I'm going to start out with my first question, and I'm going to throw this one actually to Jahnna and talk about your emotions when you found out, that your dad was terminal. How did that impact you?
I'm trying to think. It was, I was already a care partner for him. It kind of, what was happening at that moment was he was having terrible pain. So the way it impacted me, at the time was he was just, his bones, that we knew he had, it had gone to his bones because of the pain, and that was horrible. So I was in a really frantic state, trying to get him pain relief, running from doctor to doctor, trying to get him up on a, X-ray machine or a MRI machine. So when he finally got the, diagnosis, it was kind of, it's a weird thing to say, but it was a little bit of relief, because immediately we went to hospice and our whole life changed.
Mm-hmm.
Katie came in, she was our social worker, and he got instant pain relief, and it just felt like we were starting a new journey. It didn't feel like it's over. We felt like we were on a different journey. That's how I felt. It wasn't a horrible. It is a grief, but we were at least we were all together, and we kind of embraced it together. So it was a new adventure, I guess I should say.
Yeah. Well, and it's when you get that answer to what's going on, when you've been wondering, I think even when people get diagnosed with dementia, they say they're thrilled to have a name put to it, instead of thinking that they're crazy, that this really isn't happening, or people aren't understanding, and you can come up with some type of plan. And so I think there is a gift in diagnosis, no matter what that diagnosis is. At least it's an answer, and helps you to be able to develop a plan to move forward with that. So, Katie, let me ask you this: Can you talk to us a little bit about hospice, and I want you to kind of tell people the difference between hospice and palliative care, because I think I just don't think people understand, to be honest. And then we can kind of go on into what happens to the body and how is that affected during the process.
Okay, sure. Well, hospice care is a type of palliative care. Palliative care is comfort care. So really, anyone can be receiving comfort care at any time in their disease or condition. Someone could be having chemotherapy, and even on a road to being cured, and have palliative care. But hospice care is specifically for end stage of life. It is also comfort care, but hospice care is specifically for people who have approximately 6 months or less to live, and they are no longer seeking curative treatment like chemo or radiation or surgery. They're focusing on quality of life and comfort. Most of these people have hospice care in their own homes, which is usually their first choice. Whereas palliative care is usually done at a medical center or doctor's office during a hospital stay. There are some home care palliative care programs now, but it tends to be still more in clinics and hospitals, where they meet with a special team. The patients meet with a special team to focus on controlling their symptoms. Mm-hmm. So hospice is really more specifically end-of-life palliative care.
Okay. And typically with that, you're giving up the right for future treatment, and it's really is more about pain and comfort control. Is that correct?
Yes. The treatment's related to your, quote, terminal diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So, of course, if you break your leg or if you have a problem that's not related, you could have those things taken care of and go to the hospital. But for people, since we're talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, when we have someone on hospice who have that diagnosis, end-stage Alzheimer's, the families have usually decided at this point that they do not want their loved one to be resuscitated. They don't want feeding tubes. They don't want aggressive antibiotics to be hospitalized in the hospital for IV antibiotics. These things are very distressing to people, especially with Alzheimer's and dementia, and they generally want to keep their loved ones at home or wherever they're living, and not do all of these aggressive, life-prolonging treatments any longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when my dad had brain cancer and we had to make that decision, and he had pneumonia, and they said, well, we can give him a shot for his pneumonia. My whole family started jumping up and down going, yeah, give it to him. And I just said no. And everyone looked at me like, where'd you come from? What are you talking about? And I just said,
pneumonia.
Yeah.
Right.
And I said, this is not going to make Dad any better. It's going to get rid of the pneumonia, but he's not going to get up and walk and talk. And be the dad you thought, and then hospice said, yeah, she's right. And, then everyone thought about it, and we decided not to at that point, because he was bedridden and things, and that wasn't what he would want. And same with my mom towards the end of life with her, we made the same decision, but we had a difficult time with the nursing home, the night nurse abiding by the hospice plan, and that was a little irritating for us. And
we see that at facilities sometimes. We had a patient recently who couldn't feed herself, and her husband did not want them to keep feeding her because she had said to him, when I can't feed myself, I do not want anyone to feed me. But so there was some difficulty with the caregivers accepting that because they still wanted to feed her, even though she was starting to have difficulty swallowing. So there are issues like that come up when people are not at home that really need to be clarified earlier on to make it easier when the time comes.
Yeah, and this was well known and communicated, and it was just blocked, and it was very, very frustrating from a family level. I mean, even they were giving her oxygen, and it wasn't, hospice said it's not appropriate at this point, and then we thought that had gotten taken care of, and then in the morning, the morning nurse called me and said, I want to talk to you about this oxygen. We don't think it's appropriate. In fact, it's cutting into her face, and I'm just like, that was supposed to have been, done with last night. And she said, oh, I'm just so sorry. And it was just a lot of, it was too bad. So, as a family member, you do have to advocate and stand up and communicate strongly with those things.
Do you feel like now that people are actually actively having a discussion about how they want to die, and that maybe those nurses that right now are rogue nurses running off and doing their own thing and not, following the patient's request might be more likely to follow it now? I mean, have you noticed any change since your mom's death?
That's a tough one. It's a tough one because I think that there are, people are trained in a certain mode, and I really think that was part of it. And I think it's really up to those communities and facilities to say, no, this is not, I think they need to do some retraining, I guess is what I'm saying. And, I had to leave town, and I was comfortable leaving town because my mom had told me that I wasn't going to be there when she died, and I needed to continue my work and stuff. And so I put a note on the wall, and, you can't put a note on the wall. And I'm like, I will put a note on the wall, and that note is going to stay on that damn wall until you do what you're supposed to do, And so if you don't want the note on the wall, then follow our wishes, that are very clear. And so it was funny. Like, it was like, that was one of their rules. And it's like, that's not cutting it with this family, so.
I think end of life education is really lacking, and dying process, and people, they take the person's O2 sat. They're trained to take the person's O2 reading. And if it's below a certain, if it's below 90, they're supposed to put oxygen on. But when someone is dying, that is not what you do. And I think people, like Jahnna said, and what you said, Lori, I think I go into these facilities all the time, and they're always training new caregivers. They have high turnover, and they don't train them in the dying process or end-of-life care. It's not really part of their training. And it's something that I hope this book will be used for. But I'm constantly having to tell people, caregivers, that no, this is not what you do when someone is dying. You don't, try to make them eat. You don't put oxygen on them. But it's kind of a ongoing battle, I find.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I love that you've written this book. I mean, as you know, I deal with people who are diagnosed with dementia and their families, and this is a conversation that needs to be had. And a lot of times it's the person diagnosed that wants to have the conversation, and the family doesn't want to. And, they really want their wishes known. And, death shouldn't be any scarier than birth. There's no rules at either end, and there's no real guidebook with this. And it's all about knowing that you were just never, ever going to be totally prepared, and
that's true.
And
you know what? What's interesting, Lori, now that you're saying that, I had the great benefit of feeling really prepared, my whole family, because of Katie. And we used to be, when we were neighbors, she would come home and say, today was a great death. And, and then I'd say, what is that? And so she'd explain to me, that it's, patients dying the way they want. And she would be really specific about the death. And so when my father was diagnosed and, with 6 months to live, Katie came on, and she really basically was our guide or Sherpa through his last 6 months. And we weren't afraid because, and our book tells this, what she told me is, what happens to the body, what happens to the brain, what happens to, whether they want to eat. When they stop eating, don't try to force them to eat. That's the body doing its work. And even in the last days with my father, she would talk me through what's going on with his body. And even in the last hours, she was pointing out, see the rash that, gathers around the organs. And she was saying, she said that means he's actively dying. And she was talking to him saying, you're doing a great job, Charlie. And she was telling my mom and I what a good job. And we're all in there marveling at the wonder of the body being able to send itself off without he wasn't in pain, and he was, asleep by then, breathing heavily, but he was, I wasn't afraid. And as we approached when he was conscious, he wasn't afraid because of knowing so much about it and being guided through the whole process. That none of this is, like you said, Katie, the other day, you said none of it is, it's all normal. It's not unusual. So it's nice to know that the things that your body's doing or your patient's or loved one's body is doing is the right thing. It's exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess when I was saying that you're not prepared is, to me, it's really about a letting go process. And, you're not going to be able to control when this happens or how this happens because, it just, there isn't there to me. And again, maybe I'm wrong. There isn't a total guidebook. I think your book guides people in terms of expectations and process and really helps them let go. Because to me, one of the biggest things that I see people trying to do is control it or stop it or deny it. And it sounds like, Jahnna, where you were at was you were just comfortable with it, that this is normal. You were educated that, and how we don't think this is normal amazes me because we know we're not going to live forever. But it's that strong denial that we have. And we'd like to avoid things that are uncomfortable, and yet it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. We're the ones making it uncomfortable. To me, it's
the more we talk about it. The more we talk about it, and the more we learn about anything, it becomes less scary. And but of course there is certain uncertainty. There's an uncertainty about our emotions, and I found that people, they've been taking care of their loved ones with dementia or Alzheimer's for a long period of time, and they say to me this. They say to me a lot, I thought I was ready. I've been losing him or her for years and years, and I thought I was ready. But when the person actually dies, we're never ready to lose a loved one. And I think people are surprised at the grief they have, even though they've been expecting this for years and years, that the grief is something that they don't expect. That sort of, the impact that it has on them emotionally, even though they've been expecting it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to put it. Katie, why don't you talk to us about what happens to the body in the last months and weeks and days of life?
Well, of course it varies, but this is all very general, and it can happen at different times. But usually over the last few months of life, the person might start withdrawing from life, so their circle becomes smaller and smaller. For example, maybe they used to watch the news every morning and read the newspaper, so that they just stop doing that, and they don't want to see their friends so much anymore. They want to stop. They stop going out, and they just have less energy. So they turn inward. They may become quieter, not want to talk even to their loved ones as much. Sometimes there's some reminiscing. People start talking about their lives, life review, reaching out to people, calling people. And physically their bodies are losing energy. So they're sleeping more, maybe starting with a nap in the daytime, then maybe 2 naps. Definitely appetite decreases. So they'll start refusing to eat certain foods, usually meat first, than vegetables. Soft foods like yogurt and puddings and maybe cold fruit are usually what they eat later, or drinking shakes. But the appetite really decreases. So that's kind of, and then as it gets down to weeks, that just happens more and more. Sleeping more, less energy, may start having some difficulty swallowing. People with Alzheimer's and dementia generally start having difficulty swallowing earlier on, because that's more of a neurological thing than just getting very weak at the very end of life. Mm-hmm. So with Alzheimer's, the weight loss and decrease of eating is pretty significant, and unable to control their bowels, losing the ability to walk, and but with all people who are dying at the very end, the last few days and hours become more similar, in that one day the person just cannot get out of bed anymore. They just have no energy. Their bodies are using all the energy they have just to breathe and just to talk. Mm-hmm. So that's why they end up not eating at all. Their bodies cannot digest the food anymore. And if they feel pressure to eat and force themselves to eat, usually they end up feeling bloated, nauseated. Their bodies just cannot digest the food anymore. Mm-hmm. And then talking really decreases to where they can't talk anymore, because, again, they don't have the energy to talk, mm-hmm. and they can't even process what they're saying anymore. They become kind of confused, almost in a different world, almost like they have one foot in both worlds. Mm-hmm. And so as they eat and drink less, the body becomes dehydrated, which when you're dying is not a bad thing. That is something that there's a big misunderstanding about. Mm-hmm. As they become dehydrated, they get more sleepy, drowsy, the body releases endorphins. And usually the people, as they become sedated, they actually, there can be a mild euphoria with that. So that's why we don't want to correct dehydration at this point with IV fluids, because at this point, we're just going against the natural dying process. Mm-hmm. And usually the last few days of life, people are sleeping. They can still hear. The hearing is the last sense to go. So it's important to still talk to your loved one and say whatever you need to say. And then there's a lot of changes with breathing at the very end. Mm-hmm. And that we can control symptoms like breathing, restlessness. If there's pain, we can control them with medications that can be put in people's cheeks, so that if they're not able to swallow, they can still absorb the medications. So that's sort of it generally.
Well, Katie mentioned a natural process. The travel metaphor. The travel metaphor that seems the travel metaphors that seem to show up.
Yeah, sometimes in the last weeks or so, people start talking about having to go somewhere. We do hear these travel metaphors a lot. My father talked about having to get on a ship. And people talk about, well, I have to pack my bags. I have to get ready to go. They're coming for me. Sometimes they start seeing people in the room that we're not seeing. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they see their mothers. And they feel that they are being guided, that these people are coming to help them. Usually they're people that have already died. And so this is fairly common, too, that people start having visions, or some people think they're hallucinations, but they are there. And usually they're very comforting. But the travel metaphor is very common. People, usually in the last few days, they may even have a period where they get agitated because they feel a sense of urgency. They feel that they're going, and they feel that they have to get ready. So that is something we hear a lot, too.
Yeah.
You also mentioned recently, Katie, that people with dementia, sometimes they'll have moments of real clarity, a surge of energy.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I had a patient last week, and she had trouble talking for a while, making any sense of her words. But about a week before she died, she said to her son, "Because I love you, I have to tell you that I need to go." Mm-hmm. She said it as clear as day to her son, "I need to go, and I have to tell you this because I love you."
Wow.
And so sometimes people with Alzheimer's or dementia who haven't really been able to communicate verbally are able to have a moment of clarity or some moments of clarity where they're able just to say things very clearly. And this is just a gift to the families, and something that's really amazing when this happens.
Oh, definitely. definitely. I've been involved with several deaths, and the journey has just been amazing. At the end, when my dad died, I actually felt his energy run up my arm. And it was just just electric. And I was like yelling at my brother, touch him, and my brother didn't feel anything. But my dad and I were just so connected. Or when my mom died, like I said, I was out of town because she told me I wasn't going to be there and that I couldn't be there, that she needed and she came to me in dreams. And some people might think that that's bizarre, but that's what happens with me. No. And she said, you're not going to be there. I need them to experience the death process, and they won't if you're there, because you'll do everything, because that's who you are. And so lo and behold, here I have 2 speaking engagements in Arizona. My family is thinking I'm having a nervous breakdown because I'm always the one there. And plus, they're a little scared to be there on their own. And my 2 brothers and, all of their families were there. And yet there's my daughter, who's kind of running the show, because my brothers really didn't step up, which was fine. But they were all packed into the room. But what I didn't expect, and I think I really want to share this with people and hope you'll share it with others, was I was prepared to just call in and get updates. And my daughter did FaceTime. So I was at sitting in the airport in baggage claim doing FaceTime, saying goodbye to my mom again because they thought she was going to go. And, I was able to do last rites. I was able to guide my family when my mom needed some warm blankets, or when she needed ice chips, or when they needed to go ask for washcloths to cool her down, or whatever it might be. Yeah. I could still assist them in seeing some of those changes, but allowing them to physically do it. And I really don't feel like I missed out on anything. I was really part of it. I could put my brother in line when he was out of whack and no one else would do it and was uncomfortable, via video, and still be part of the process. So, there's lots of ways to engage in terms of the dying process.
Yeah, FaceTime and Skype, they're wonderful now that we have the ability to do that.
Yeah, it was really, really amazing. And I just, I didn't mean to get us off track, but I just think, my next question is, what is a good death, and what can we do to make that happen? And I wanted to throw that in there because to me, that was a good death. My mom had what she wanted, She really lined it up ahead of time there.
Well, I think that's where hospice comes in, because one of the first things I ask my patients, what are your goals? What are your hopes? What are your wishes for the time you have left? When it comes to the moment of dying, most people say when they're asked that they want to die at home, surrounded by loved ones. And that's important, but I also think about the time leading up to the death. Mm-hmm. This precious time that they have left. How do you want to use this time? And so to me, that's part of having a good death too, is having that quality of time. If you do have, a disease where you have this time and you're going to die, how do you want to use this time? Mm-hmm. So I think it is important to explore people's goals and wishes. I think, when people write out their advance directives and they write what their wishes are, if they're in these different situations, I think those need to be honored. So that's a part of it too, is that, honoring what they have expressed ahead of time, so that they can live their life on their own terms as much as possible and be where they want to be and die the way they want to die. And of course, that takes communication ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Katie had mentioned the advance directive and having a healthcare representative to make sure that the directive is followed is really valuable. Really, the moment my dad was put on hospice, we sat in a circle and filled out the advance directive. And the good part was, because all of us were filling one out for ourselves, it wasn't like my father was being grilled. Now, what do you want? What do you want? What choices do you want? We all discussed it. It allowed us to have a discussion. And so so his wishes were followed, and we all felt really good with it, and we all knew what his wishes were because we were all sitting in that circle.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew exactly. We'd shared that information, which, Katie, you've mentioned sometimes people make these decisions. They fill out an advance directive, like my father-in-law, but didn't share it with his second wife, and so his wishes weren't followed, and he didn't have I would say he did not have a good death. But because she was doing a forced feeding tube when he kept saying, I don't want it, and all those things. So, but they were living abroad, and we really couldn't do anything. But so I think the sooner we all kind of talk about it with each other, the better. Don't you, Katie?
Yeah, I think communication is really the key. I think the more people you can tell, the better.
Yeah.
Just put it out there.
I don't. Well, actually, it's interesting. I had this conversation with my mother this morning. She's 93, and I'm her care partner. And she just was in the hospital last week with pneumonia and sepsis. So she came home and kind of had wearing a different, she's saying, I'm ready to go. And so we've been talking about maybe doing palliative care now instead of going to the hospital. And so we had that discussion this morning. So I'm right in the thick of it right now.
Again.
Yeah.
Different situation, but a lot of similar things happening again.
Yeah. But it's great, since we've been writing this book, she's been in on it, and we've been talking with her. So I think we feel the conversation I had with my mom this morning, I wouldn't have been able to have before my dad died.
Okay.
But now that we've gone through it, his death together, and working on our book and talking about it a lot, now we can. And, so.
What a blessing.
Good. So now.
I mean, really.
Yes, it is.
What a blessing. Because it is. I don't think there's anything worse than not knowing what somebody wants, and if you wait too late, it's like, do they want to be cremated, or do they want this? Do they want that? And all of a sudden families look at each other, with these blank stares at one another going, oh my God, I don't know. We didn't talk about that. Now you're making these big decisions. Or I know with my family, when we did wills and healthcare directives, because my folks are like, we don't have that much. It's not. And I'm like, no, you need to get this stuff in order. And then my husband and I did it at the same time to kind of take some of the scariness out of it. And that made it easier. But then, then my husband and I had to have a conversation with our daughter. And she did not like the idea that I wanted to be cremated. And she's like, I don't want you burnt, And then I would joke with her. I said, let me be small once in my life. Come on, just go with it. Go with it.
I love that.
And throw me to the wind. And, and so we had this kind of fun, humorous conversation about it. And she's still uncomfortable with it. But I know she'll do it. And I think she understands it more now on many different levels, versus being just forced to make that decision,
now, Lori, she has the time. She has the time to process it, get ready. You gave her that gift.
I sure hope so.
And I think by preparing for our deaths and putting everything in writing, and we're giving a gift to our children, so they don't have to go through that. They don't have to go through wondering what we would want. It really is a gift to the people that we're leaving to really prepare as much as we can.
Well, and, I really encourage kids to get involved in this too. I mean, kids should have powers of attorney and healthcare directives and things. And, I've stated this on the show many times where, I've got friends who have had kids who have gotten in accidents or very sick, and they can't communicate with the doctor, but they're paying the bill, because they don't have a piece of paper. And and so it's just good business. It's good living business to take care of these things. And we're all so conscious of running our lives the way that we want, and yet why would we leave one of the most important pieces go of having some control in saying that? When we look at it like that, it really just doesn't make any sense at all.
hmm It's like my mom. We went to a bookstore a couple of weeks ago, and she bought this book that just was published in 2016. It's a new edition of Cicero's How to Grow Old.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just been reading that like a Bible. Every night she's reading through it. And she told me, I want to get copies for you and the children and her two remaining friends, who are out there in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and they're really, practical things, how to progress through life and accept yourself at each stage that you're at. So, and it's written in one side in I guess it's Greek or Roman, and on the other in a really easy to read English. So
Mm-hmm.
I recommend that book.
Yeah, it's important, very important stuff. I remember one of our gals in the dementia chats that I do. She decided that she was going to, tell everybody, and for like 3 months, she met with everybody and prepared for the dying process and wanted to make sure that everybody knew and that they could reminisce and say their last goodbyes. And it's just like, how beautiful is that? To be able to do that and coordinate that.
I have a patient now. She has 3 children, and she's younger. She's she has cancer, but she's taking a trip with each of her kids individually. She's taking a road trip with each of them before she dies. And I just thought it was such a wonderful idea, just to take a road trip and go somewhere together alone and just have this time that she's spending with each of her kids.
Yep. Or I'll use the example with my dad. We knew that he wouldn't make it till their 50th anniversary. So we had a 49 and a half year anniversary party, and they renewed their vows. And my mom with dementia, even though she couldn't pick out her clothes or tell you what the weather was like, she knew exactly what was going on, in that moment. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment to have. And, we pulled it off in 2 weeks, and we had 250 people show up, and
wow.
it was just gorgeous.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So, we can have a good death. We can communicate, and we can fill out our advance directives and have a conversation and not feel, not be in denial, not be ashamed, not, just get rid of all of that stuff and just have an honest talk of how would you like to exit? What would you like
and
that
Lori,
to
I
look
think
like?
it actually makes life richer when you do all those things. You just have less anxiety and fear. It's not just there lurking in the background. And I think we live richer lives when we do that. It's really about living while we're dying, or living with dying, because death is always there. I mean, it's always there, circling around us. And so if we embrace it as something that inevitable and plan for it, I think we live better.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to ask Katie, because I've just found it to be such a huge gift to be able to be with somebody when they die. I know it's not. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think a lot of it's not their cup of tea because it's scary, and they've never done it for the most part. But I've had the honor of being with several different people, and each was so different, but so beautiful, and just it really comforted me to be able to be there with them. And what do you find with families that you work with there? And then Jahnna, I want to ask you about that as well.
Well, I think it's a very sacred time, and I know, like, I've been at births too, and births are just like awe-inspiring. And I really think it's similar to when someone's dying. It's awe-inspiring, and there's a transition that happens, and of course we all have our different spiritual beliefs. But I just feel this energy has left this body, and it's just a moment that is just like time stops. And I try to encourage families to view it as a sacred event, not just a physical death, and create a sacred space around the dying if they can, or if they want to, with music or candles or prayer, and to spend some time with the body afterwards, not immediately have the mortuary come and pick up the body, but, do a ritual bathing, dressing, and have that time to say goodbye. And again, not everyone wants to do this, and that's fine. It's very individual, but I just feel it's just a profound moment. And being at a death, I always feel a sense of gratitude, like that I was able to be there. And it just, the rest of the day, I always feel like I'm in an altered state. Like I feel like I'm kind of floating around, and it's something that you would understand if you were at a death. I know you do, but it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain unless you've been at one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
A friend of mine told me that Katie was at the death of his father, and she told him he said, this is the most affecting thing she told you, Katie, you told our friend that take the time to be with his dad after he had died. Spend the time, sit with him, because as soon as someone, the funeral home comes, he becomes, I think this is what he said, a commodity. And before that, he's still part of the family, and he's still, and take the time to allow yourself to, embrace that. And he said that made all the difference for him. My experience with my dad, sort of like what you said, Lori, the electrical charge up your arm. Katie and I were in the room, and my dad loved this song, Take Him Home from Les Mis, and he played it all the time. So I put it on, and we'd done a two-set in his mouth to make sure his mouth was moist, and, all the comfort things. And we walked out of the room, and there was this, I had a baby monitor. And suddenly over the monitor, there was this crackling, like static. And Katie turned to me and said, he's gone. And, we went back in, and there he was. And he was that we'd listen. I feel like we heard his essence going. And we went back in, and he looked really relaxed. His whole body was relaxed. And it was a great moment. And just like, we spent time with him and put his hat on. He was a military. He had been a lifelong, a pilot, and so we dressed him up and took the time to, look at how beautiful he was, and also revel in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Why don't we talk about 5 easy to do tips for taking care of yourself as a caregiver? And I'm not sure which one of you wants to take that.
I'll start with it.
You start, Jahnna. Yeah. You're in it. You were in it.
I'm in the thick of it. Well, here's what I advise everybody. I'm kind of a scattered person, and I can spin out of control pretty, frantically, trying to do 10 things at once, starting to load the, washer and forgetting that to turn it on, and put something on the stove and forget that. But the thing that has helped me with both my dad and now my mom is that I keep a notebook, and I write down every phone call every call that has involved my mom, to start out with, doctors, when they called, when an appointment is, when I need to call back, when they're going to call back, who's going to come visit, all those things. So keeping that kind of a notebook, but also in the notebook, and this is the really, really, really important thing that it's hard for us all to do, but it's the list of things when people say, what can I do to help? Make a list in this notebook of so you can flip it open and say, and put their name next to it. Oh, well, you know what? I really could use someone to sit with my mom while I go to this appointment I have to go to. Or it'd be great if you could pick up the medicine. Or I haven't been able to mow the lawn. Or, all those things or my car's out of gas. If I gave you money, could you just fill up the tank because I have to take my mom later today, and whatever it is. If you have that list, then it's a specific, and the people say, oh, I can do that. Or you can give them 3 options and they'll pick one. And it really, because everybody wants to help, but you never know what to tell them. You brave it out. You go, well, I'm fine. We're good. Thanks for offering. But put their name down and put their phone number next to their name. Those are all the list has been helpful for me. Katie, what other things have we've talked about?
I think that people, the biggest thing I see is that people do not get help and support soon enough. They feel they have to do it all themselves. And as I've heard you say, Lori, we this is a community. It takes all of us. It takes all of us reaching out. All of us are going to need help at times, and all of us are going to be able to give help at times. And I tell my patients, now it's your turn. Someday it's going to be my turn. I try to normalize again that we all are going to need help at some point, and that's why we're here. And so I think that people wait far too long to get help, and I think people get in hospice far too late. And I feel like you mentioned turning it from crisis to caring. I really like that, Lori.
Mm-hmm.
That don't wait till there's a crisis. Let's start caring for each other sooner and letting people help us. We don't have to do it all on our own. And I see that all the time. When I admit a patient, here's this wife or husband struggling for years, and finally they have some help with us, and it's such a huge relief. But I wonder why they couldn't get help earlier, and not necessarily from hospice, but from groups in the community or just friends who offer. Like Jahnna said, write a list of things you need help with, and when someone offers, say, okay, I have this list. Because I find people really do want to help. They just need a little direction. They probably don't want to interfere. So, we tend not to tell them we need help because we don't. They think they're interfering, and we think that we're, being a burden. And I think we just have to kind of let go of some of this in our culture and reach out more.
Yeah.
Also, I would say a real key for self-care is take time. Mm-hmm. Take time to eat. Just because standing in front of the refrigerator and grabbing all the carbohydrates or all the whatever it is, or in the cupboard, is not. You do have that extra 15 minutes to sit down and actually make good choices for yourself. I gained a whole lot of weight when I was taking care of my dad, just because I got, like I said, I got myself into a frenzy of trying to add their needs to my very full schedule already.
Mm-hmm.
And in my own life with work and my own family. And I just was the way I found the extra time was to take it from everything that made me healthy and happy. So I used to go for a walk in the morning with my friend. I cut the walk out because that gave me an extra hour. I did all these things that didn't make anything better for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I also made a list of what my parents' needs were, and they weren't that many. They were sit down and spend some time with them, really.
Mm-hmm.
Don't frantically try to shove the right pills and the right food and the right everything at them. Just sit down and listen and let them know you're there for them.
Yeah. So, and in our book, Laura, we have a whole chapter on taking time for yourself, and I think we have a lot of really good self-care advice. And I think, like Jahnna said, just taking time, just sitting and being present with your loved one, rather than feeling like you always have to be doing something. I think the gift of our presence sometimes is more important than doing. And I think that, one really important piece of advice is just taking time and also for ourselves, Katie, and for our loved ones.
Yeah.
But Katie has this thing that she does that I've observed her do with both my parents and many people. When she goes to visit somebody, she pulls up a chair right next to them, really close to them. And if there's not a chair, she'll sit on their walker. If there's not a walker, she'll kneel beside their chair. Sometimes she's laid in bed with them. She lets them, she'll kick off her shoes and get in bed and say, how are you doing? And that
not everybody.
Know, oh, not everybody. Yes.
I do that with all my patients.
Yeah. But I guess I've watched that, and if I were to take one, offer anybody one tip, that's what I would say has really changed my life. When I go in to see my mother each day and she lives with me, I make sure I don't stand in the doorway. I don't stand above her. She's able to get around, but I pull up a chair and I pull it close to her.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like we're going to have a nice
chat and I'm going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I have to share a story because this was really life-changing for me, and it was a hospice woman who gave me this advice. But my uncle came to me in a dream, and he basically said it's time for Kay to go, and he was there with his arms open and his brilliant smile and his eyes glistening, and said, "You need to go tell Kay I'm here. It's time." And my aunt was in the hospital, dying of cancer, and was in hospice. And I went down to visit with her, and I thought, I just didn't know how to talk to her because she was really religious, and I thought she would think that I'm crazy because Uncle Chuck's ghost came to see me, And so I talked about everybody and everyone. And what was going on. But before I walked in the door, she said, don't expect anything from her. Don't expect her to squeeze her hand, your hand, open her eyes, talk to you. Chances of that is very slim, but just know she will take in everything that you have to say or that you do. She will take it all in, and she will know. So you just go in and say what you need to say and do what you need to do, so that you have closure. So I'm yapping away, talking about the family, and then finally I said, "Okay, Auntie Kay, I'm going to tell you why I'm really here." And this whole time I'm sitting there and I'm holding her hand, and she's just sleeping. And and then I told her that Uncle Chuck came, and he was brilliant, and I didn't even realize it was a dream because it was so real. And he looks so wonderful, and he's so happy, and his arms are wide open, and he's telling you it's time, and that he's here for you now, and it's time for you to cross over. And all of a sudden, she squeezes my hand. Her eyes pop open. She looks at the ceiling. She gets this brilliant smile on her face. The whole room got chilly. And yet my aunt was so peaceful looking up at the ceiling. And I know dang well she saw Uncle Chuck. And then she squeezed my hand and her eyes shut, but the smile remained on her face. And I remember just sitting with her for about another 20 minutes, and then I decided to leave. And about 2 hours later, I got the call she passed. And it was
what
like,
a good gift you gave her.
Oh, and what a gift she gave me to be part of that, and both of them, Uncle Chuck and Annie Kay. And, family was upset that they, why didn't Dad come to us? And I said, you weren't in the mind frame to deal with it, and it was years later, they said, you're right. We couldn't have dealt with it.
Yeah.
And thank you. But it took quite a while for that because they were very, very upset originally. But I thought that they needed to hear the story too.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
But it was just such a beautiful, beautiful story. And just a connection that you can't even describe. You just can't even describe it, but to sit back and think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I felt like I helped her pass. I did what I was called on, and and so it's just a privilege and an honor, to be part of that. So, don't. I guess my thought to people is, look for the beauty in it, and you'll find it, because it definitely is there. It definitely is there.
Katie, you said you tell your families to write down what the patients are saying, right?
Well, yeah, because there's some wonderful things that come out in the final days or hours, even, that people say such remarkable things, or they might talk about what they're seeing. And I just, as part of the notebook, I just sometimes I advise people to journal, to write down some of the experiences, because there can be such precious, funny, all kinds of things that can come out in the final weeks or days. And I think it's great to have that to look back on.
Yeah,
it was funny. The day before Dad died, he kept telling me he really missed his daddy, and I'd never heard him call his father Daddy. He had always called him Pop. But I had been sleeping on the floor of his room, and the night before he died, he and his father, Pop, they were having a conversation together. Of course, I didn't hear the other half, but I heard his half, and they were laughing and having a great time. And he was saying, "I knew you'd say that. I knew you'd say that." And so that for a couple, and 2 weeks before that, my father, there was someone standing over my dad's left shoulder that he would lean and whisper to, and then listen, and then laugh, or then cover his mouth because he didn't want us to see what he was saying to this person. And just before he died, he asked me if he was still there, and I said, "Yes, he is." So that's good. So, so those are all remarkable. Isn't it great that you can be there at these kind of amazing, the wonder of mystery of life, I guess.
Yep.
Yes, the mystery of life and death.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, people can get a hold of you through your website, which is livingwithdying.com, or your Facebook page, which is the same name, Living with Dying book. If you put that in, you'll go right to their Facebook page. Or Twitter is twitter.com/guide for care. And 4 is spelled out FOR, guide for care. Well, this has just been a really amazing conversation. Jahnna, is there anything else that you would like to add?
You mean about the general?
Yep. Anything at all?
I guess I would. Well, I guess I would hope that everybody gets to have an experience like I've had with, like Katie. So sometimes it's good to go and have someone else be there with you to help you get through that experience. So I guess that's my addition. Don't be afraid to share your needs, and that ask for friends to share your journey with you. So
great.
That would be my addition.
Okay. Katie, how about you? Any last words?
I think just like Jahnna said, ask for support earlier rather than later. And that goes with getting on hospice earlier rather than later, because most of my families wish they had had hospice sooner.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk to your doctor about it. If you feel that you're not getting anywhere with your doctor, you can call your local hospice directly. And I go out and make visits all the time just to talk to people about hospice. We don't need a doctor's order just to talk about hospice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just seeking help and support would be my last word of advice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for
thank you, Lori,
putting this wonderful book together. Again, you will not be disappointed if you pick this book up, Living with Dying. It is broken down very easily. There is actually one section on here, dementia at the end of life. But, so much of the death process is universal. And so it doesn't, and it's for all ages. We should really be having these conversations, and there's great resources in here. So I would highly encourage you to go out and pick up this book, Living with Dying. In wrapping up here, again, I just want to give a shout out to all of those that are going on our dementia-friendly cruise and symposium November 11th through the 18th. We still have some openings in our group. If you would like to join us, we'd love to have you. We will be having 4 people with dementia as speakers, along with a music therapist and Cindy Lazinski, who is working on a dementia-friendly community in Colorado, as well as myself. All of our shows here, too, on Alive and Social, I should say, are archived. And we've been doing this for 6 years. So if there's anything that you are interested in, chances are we've covered the conversation. I also want to just give a plug for the Quality Aging Survey that is now up and running, and you can go to our blog and get information on that. It's a wonderful survey that's being done by the University of Minnesota, a gal there, for her thesis, and it's a prime time with our healthcare being in such a conbobbled state to let your opinions be known on what you are looking for and what you feel quality is in the healthcare arena. Other than that, I'm going to go ahead and let you go and wish you all a wonderful week, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.